On three. One, two, three. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of True Crime and Cocktails. We're so glad that you're here. As always, I am your host, Lauren Ash, and as always, I am joined by my co-hostess with the mostess, Christy Oxborrow. How you feeling?
Doing great.
Fantastic.
Jazzed to be here.
I'm jazzed.
Yeah,
I also feel jazzed.
you should. I,
I last night was my big concert in Toronto at the Phoenix.
yeah,
Yeah. And at one point, somebody said something, I can't remember. The crowd was wonderful and lovely. We were having it was like, this is the worst snowstorm Toronto's seen in years. And I'm like, of course, it's the day of my concert. That makes complete sense.
yeah.
But somebody yelled something from the crowd, and I said back, are there some True Crime and Cocktails fans here? Oh, somebody said something about Mother Laurel, because Mother Laurel was
Of
at,
course.
I was like, my mother's at the merch stand. She's wearing her merch mom shirt. And someone was like, Mother Laurel. And I was like, oh, is there True Crime and Cocktails fans here? A lot of applause.
Of course.
So thank you to any of our listeners who came to the show. How fabulous. I know a lot of people were not able to make it because of the snow, which was devastating for me.
Yeah.
That show was like my entire crux of being for a couple of months. Like it was what I
Yeah.
did all day, every day. Like I was always working on something to do with the concert, working on something to do with the show. And
Mm-hmm.
I put a lot of effort and energy and passion and love into it. And so the idea that there was this like essentially like not a natural disaster, but act of
Close.
God, I think they technically call them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a lot of snow in a fairly short amount of time. It was true
Yeah.
chaos, true chaos. But anyway, look, long story short, am I already cooking up a scheme to have another show here in the spring because there's so many people that missed out? I mean, of course I am.
Of
Of
course.
course I am.
Of course.
I mean, that band, man. I don't know whether I also am like getting worried. I'm like, am I telling them too much how great I think they are? Like, do I need to try and cool out? Because I'm in awe of those women. Like, truly, I was just like, this is the one of the greatest nights of my life. Like,
Yeah.
just a dream come true to be fronting an all-girl band um who are so talented. Like, and again, I feel like it's weird. It's weird to like focus on the gender because they're just so talented. Like they're
Of
the most
course.
talented musicians I feel like I've ever met. Um, but I think it's because as women, I feel like there's such a like stigma, right? Where it's like
Sure.
people are always like, "Oh, you're good for a woman," or
Mm-hmm.
whatever the bullshit is. It's like the people who say that women aren't funny, who can all suck my
Uh,
dick. Um, like I think it's one of those same things where, so I think for me, it's not that I'm like surprised at all that these women would be so good. It's not that. It's that I passionately want to pump them up. Like I want to shout it
of
from the
course.
rooftops that I'm like, anybody who doubts women, look at these women. Like that's what it is for me. Do you know what
Mm-hmm.
I mean? Where it's
Mm-hmm.
like, it's not incredulous. It's me going like, we all knew that women are capable of this, but
Of
everyone
course.
second guesses us. So I want to scream it from the top of my lungs
Of
to
course.
anyone within shouting distance, you know?
Yes. I'll
Yeah.
say it. The photo of you like on stage together, you look like you all belong together.
Oh, thank you. The whole time I was like, they were like, what do you, there was one point where one of them, and also, by the way, the sweetest humans alive, like
Of
just
course.
the greatest. At one point, one of them said to me, what do you want us to wear for the show? And my response was literally, I literally said, oh God, you guys are so cool. Whatever you want. Like I have, like, I don't. And they were like,
Mhm.
no, no, like you can have input. Like you're allowed to have input. And I was like, I understand that, but truthfully, I'm gonna be looking to you guys to like sign off on my outfit. So if you could just throw
Of
together
course.
whatever you think is right. And
You
then of
all looked
course,
very coordinated.
well, I think they coordinated themselves. They were like, why don't we all do like kilts? And like and I
Yeah.
was like, I love this so much. But then it was like I was like coming out in my different outfit choices, and there was like a couple of pieces I was trying to figure out. And then Cindy, who plays bass, who's incredible, and you can find her on Spotify and stream her EP because she's very talented. Um, she she was like, you need a different necklace. She was like, you need a choker. Takes the choker off of her own neck. And I was
Of
like, don't
course.
do that. I was like, I cannot take that from you. And she goes, I'm not going to wear it. I wasn't going to wear it anyway. Probably lying. But anyway, and then of course I was like, of course this is exactly what it needed to be. And then she's like, I think you should layer it. Here's another. And I literally had this moment where I went, God, I love being in a girl band. I was like, this is
Yeah.
awesome. Like, it was like,
Hmm.
it's just the energy that you want. Because again, like,
Yep.
I'm not negating the very talented men that I've had the privilege of working with either, but it's just a different vibe when you're
Of
backstage before a
course.
show with all women and it's like, how does this look? Is this whatever? Let's exchange pieces. Like, it's just I think I just, well, we all know this. I love women so much
Of
that
course.
I just the girls and the gays have my heart, as we all know.
Of
So
course. Of
yeah,
course.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I love
But
this for
yeah,
you.
what's that?
I love this for you.
Oh, God, thank you. You know what? So do I. So do I. The run out of 2024 really
Yep.
tried to murder me dead. And so I was like,
Yep.
and I think that was part of why the snow unraveled me because I was
Mm,
like, I've poured my life into creating a win and creating joy for myself
of
because
course.
it was like, I feel like uh, the only thing keeping me afloat is the women in my life. And doing this podcast, I was like, you need another project too. You need to like
Sure.
have a purpose. You're not working right now, have a purpose. And so the idea that like after all that work, and I was like, we're selling tickets, it's gonna be amazing. It's like storm of the century. I was like, that is just so upsetting.
Hmm.
You know, I
Hmm.
was like, fuck, it's just so, yeah.
Oh, it's classic.
I had a moment the day before, I believe, where I was like, I'm gonna give myself an hour to really feel bad for myself, to like really feel sorry for myself. And I was like, I'm gonna wallow. I'm gonna have some self-pity.
Yep.
Because listen, we all know that again, with perspective, of course, are your problems that bad? Of course. It's all relative though. And I was like, this is heartbreaking for me. So I'm just gonna allow
Yes.
myself to feel heartbroken. And you know what? It was very helpful. I highly recommend. Feel your feelings, sit in them. Give
Yes.
yourself some time to like, I'm just gonna feel how bad this feels. And then I was like, and it's gonna be the greatest thing it can be. And it was. It absolutely was.
There
The only
you go.
negative, the only negative was I was pissed that I don't get to do it again today. I was like, now I'm like, well, I got the first one out. Now I know all the things I would do differently.
Oh,
Give me
sure.
another kick at the can, you know?
Sure. Well, you'll love this nerd response. Did you make some notes?
Of course.
Of course. See, there you go. And then
See,
so next time you'll be ready.
the big thing is I was like, this is the longest show I've performed yet. So I was like, I have
Oh.
to be careful how hard I headbang and how hard I dance because I can't wind myself too early. And then at one
Hmm.
point, so my dear friend Robbie was basically like helping run the show, and there's a lot of technical stuff I don't need to bore everybody with, but anyway, he's on the stage off to the side, he's running a playback and all of this, and he was like, if at any point you need some extra time between songs, just look at me. And it would be like, but
Hmm.
by like halfway through, it was after almost every song, I was just like finding his eyes. Like I was like, give me a sec.
Hmm.
Give me a second.
Hmm.
Let me chug some water. Give me a second.
Hmm.
Okay. All right. Let's go. But yeah, I was like, tone it down a little because I've been watching some videos of like Paramore, and I'm like,
Oh,
she's
sure.
not giving it, 200% the whole time, and I mean that, like physically, like she's not like dancing her. She's
She
conserving.
knows.
She's
She
doing a
knows.
great performance. She's still
Yeah.
moving, but I'm like, that's so that she can sing through over an hour, right? Like I was like,
Yeah.
okay, you don't have to like, you don't have to be a gymnast up here also. Like
Of course.
yeah, yeah. Because there have been times where I've headbanged myself into like a 3 day neck ache, and it's
Of
like find the balance.
course. Of
Now, did
course.
did I also take some extra strength Advil before the show? Of course I did.
Oh,
Of course I did.
that's just smart thinking.
Oh my God, I was pulling all of my like supplies out of my backpack backstage, and it was like Tums, Tiger Balm, Robaxacet, extra strength Advil, my gluten pills. The girls were just dying. I was like, this is, I mean, when you're a woman of a certain age, this is it.
What I love is, I mean, you mentioned Mother Laurel. At this rate, it's Mother Lauren. You're gonna be their Mother Lauren.
Oh my God. Look, 100%. At some point, somebody said something, and I was like, "What's going on? Do you need something to eat? Are you okay? Is there something that you don't have back here that you would like?" And they were like, "No, no, no, it was something else." And I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah." So short answer, yeah, absolutely.
Again, I could not be happier. I love you in your element.
Yeah, so do I, man. I did have this moment before going on stage. Um, and look, I don't typically get nervous like
Sure.
acting, right? Or if I do, it's a different thing. I've done it for it's my career. I've done it for a very long time. I'm very confident in that arena. And with this, it's obviously something I'm much newer to, and so I do get very nervous before shows, which is fantastic. I think I've talked about this before that I'm like I feel
Sure.
alive. It's like amazing to feel anxious in that way because it's to me it's like a positive anxiety as opposed
Sure.
to my typical crippling anxiety.
Yep, got
um
that.
but I had this moment where I was standing backstage and I was in like a stairwell and I had my hand on each wall and I found myself muttering to myself and I was just like, you did this to yourself, you wanted this. And I literally found myself going like, what are you doing? What are you doing?
Mhm.
You're 42. What are you doing? What are you
Living your
doing?
best life.
And that's the answer.
Man,
And that's the answer.
you didn't
Living my
have
best
to
life.
earn it, but you earned having that joy.
Absolutely.
I mean, you deserve the joy regardless, but you really earned having that joy.
I did. I did. Yeah. But what a delight. It just top to bottom. It also flew by.
Oh, of course.
12 songs in an encore. Let me tell you something. I,
Wowzer.
I had more in me. I had more in me.
Wow.
You know what I mean? I was like, let's go again. I was like, let's just get back up there. Keep going. Let's just do it all over again.
Of course.
Yeah.
I love this
Yeah.
for you.
Thank you. Thank you. Everyone was lovely. I mean, such a wonderful crowd. And I got to be honest with you. I'll say it. Because
Yeah,
if we're in the safe space here,
sure.
looking out into a crowd and seeing people sing your songs along with you,
Oh,
here I go.
yeah. Oh, I'd cry. I'd full
Oh,
cry.
yeah. Oh, I had to blur my eyes a couple of times. Like I was like, "Oh, don't focus on faces because it was making me emotional." And I was like, "You gotta, yeah." And there was one moment in the final song, Diet Coke and Lexapro, which is
Of
my
course.
favorite song. It was your favorite song of the new songs.
It was.
And I had this moment towards the end where I started to cry
Hmm.
because it's about obviously a heavy feeling.
Yeah.
And then I had this moment, and I'll send you the video. I'm debating whether or not I post it because it feels too self-indulgent, but I'll send it to you privately.
Thank you so much.
But there's this moment where you can see me crack and you can see my eyes. A friend of
Mm.
mine filmed it. And then I like dropped to my knees and had this moment where I'm like looking to the sky and like breathing. And I forgot that it even happened. Like it feels like a fever dream.
Oh,
But
sure.
when I watched the video, I was like, that was this moment where I was literally saying to myself, I'm just going to go here because I don't fucking care. I was literally saying to myself, like, do not cry for him.
For you.
Not about him.
No.
And it's like it was a powerful moment to watch back to myself. Do you know what I mean? Like because truly I forgot about it. Like again, like the show goes. Like it's like we
Of
do the show,
course.
we record, hit stop, it just
Bloop.
it deletes,
Yeah.
like it becomes a blur, right?
Hmm.
So I forgot that I had experienced that, but seeing the video, I was just like it was moving for myself. Because well, like it or not, there's such a catharsis with music. I mean, that is how
Yes.
I have gotten through writing these songs is like been survival for me. This has been how I've processed this. Um
Yeah.
so yeah, it was a beautiful thing. And it was very special to me. It was like a very special thing to experience. I feel like one of the cool things and I guess it's like this with doing live comedy too, but I think with music for me, I feel like it's I've talked about this before, I know, but it's more of an exchange. Like I feel like we're doing it
Sure.
together. The audience is doing it with you. They're on their feet, they're
Sure.
moving, they're singing, they're exchanging energy back to you in a way that is not the case when you do theater or live comedy. Um And so, yeah, so I just thought that was a very special thing to like experience with people that they may not know if I was experiencing, but it was very moving for me. Let's put it that way.
I love that.
Thank you.
That's for you.
Yeah.
I'm so damn proud of you.
God bless you.
I mean, we can't get into it because it'll just be 20 minutes of me just full crying, but like,
Well, at
I
one
mean,
point in the sound check, so I brought my parents.
of course.
They were very helpful to me. Ran the merch thing for me completely. Very, very helpful. Uh, but I was like, "Do you want to come to sound check?" And typically, I'm always like, I'm in my own zone, like with in general. Like I'm like, I can't have you around. I need to get in the headspace or whatever. But I was like, listen, it's because I'm on. Listen, spoiler alert, like the song says, I'm on anti-anxiety medication now, which by the way has changed my life. That's a whole other thing, and I'm happy to advocate for mental health and whatever. Not that I'm pushing people to take drugs, but anyway, it's changed my life. So anyway, I think I've just been a little bit cooler. So I was like, you guys want to come watch Soundcheck? Like I was like, not like
Uh-huh.
me at all. But at one point, I like look out at my mother, and she's a distance enough away that all I can see is her shaking her head, and it looked like she was like clenching her teeth.
Mm.
And I was like, she doesn't think that my voice was very strong in that one. Projection, complete projection. By the way, full
Uh-huh.
assumption on my part.
Of course.
I go up to her after we finish, and I go, "What were you shaking your head about?" Again in my mind, and she goes, "Oh, I was just sobbing because I'm so proud of you."
Just the absolute opposite of what you
The
thought was happening.
absolute
Mhm.
opposite. Again, what a wonderful learning moment. What a wonderful moment
Yes.
yeah. Let's you assume you make an ass out of you and me.
Hey, there it is. There it is. Look, I think it's an incredible thing.
Thank you. I really did it. You know what I mean?
You did.
Yeah.
And to think that it just started with like that one small thought of like, you know, for my birthday, I'd love to sing with a band. And look what you've fucking done since then.
In 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I all the props to you.
Thank you.
It's such an incredible accomplishment.
It really is. It really
Yes.
is. I'll own that. I'm not gonna be like, oh, I'm gonna own it. It is an incredible accomplishment.
Yes. And if
Yeah.
the world's just going to be on fire and just like
Oh,
pure hell to be in, find something that makes it a good time.
yeah, a good time with wonderful people. Like that's the other thing
Yeah.
I've got to say. And I don't know if I've talked about this before, but like I was so scared because I was like, I'm a woman of a certain age who's
Sure.
like known for a TV show primarily. And I was like,
Sure.
these musicians are going to think I'm a fraud. They're going to hate me. Any musicians are going to hate me because they're going to be like, oh, great. Like TV lady wants to do music now. Cute. My experience has been the polar opposite. Like the musician, I don't feel like I've met anyone who hasn't been like lovely and encouraging. And like the
Hey.
concept that it's like, there's room for all of us is not something
Mhm.
that I had anticipated, which is really beautiful. Like I really, I was saying as I was like going into my first rehearsal with the band, I think may have said this on the podcast. I was like, I felt like I was in high school and I was asking to sit at the cool girls table. Like I was
Of
like, oh my God, like
course.
this is so nerve-wracking.
Mhm.
Um, but what's been amazing is that it just doesn't feel that way at all. And then I'm like, well, at the end of the day, I feel like if you're a musician, you're an artist, there's probably a softness to you in some level, like
Sure.
an emotional softness. I like most artists, I feel like have that. And I
Sure.
was like, I underestimated how wonderful the people would be. So that's been joyful too, that it's like not only am
Yeah.
I doing this thing, but the people along the way have been lovely. What a gift.
What?
What a great, and you know what I think it is? I'm putting this together in the moment. I'm doing therapy in the moment. Um, it's a reminder of humanity because I
Hey.
think the end of last year
Mm.
really rocked my faith in humanity for so many different reasons in
Mhm.
so many different scenarios. I think there's a lot of that happening in America right now. And
Mm.
so I think it's lovely to have those moments, like being at that show last night and looking out at people who like came to be supportive and sang along. I'm like, how beautiful. Like it's important, I think. That's what keeps me, I think I'm putting together in this moment from really circling the drain is that it's like, no, let's remind ourselves about all of the beautiful people that exist and that it's beautiful to be around. How wonderful.
Yes. And what I love is just because we are the balancing each other out, you say something so beautiful, and the only thing I can come back with is, God, TV Lady would be an amazing album name.
I'm gonna write that down.
Because I'm not mad at it.
I'm not mad at it either.
TV Lady. I was like, ooh, that grabbed me. I do like that.
Yeah, I'm not mad at it. Listen, there's got to be new music coming out. Got to be new
Yeah.
music coming out. And I might put up an Instagram poll for the people who were there because there was a
Ooh.
lot of feedback. And most of the feedback from the people was about one specific song that they're like, that one you've got to release next.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. So got to get the next song out there. You know what I mean?
Yes.
I'm just sitting on these golden eggs. What?
I like that you made gestures like they were balls, you know?
I thought about that was my impression of a hen. I'm sitting on
Oh,
these
sure.
golden eggs. Like I had to make myself wider like a hen. You know what I mean? Like
Well, I took this as like wings
that was what,
for
yeah.
the hen. It's just because I love that. I also love that I said it looked like you're holding balls. I can't see your hands. I can see you from the elbows up. Like, I don't know. Talk about
Well,
projecting. I was like, it looks like she's carrying balls. Like,
well, let me move my hands up. This is what I was doing.
okay, I was doing that back at you. So
But
it's
that
okay. It does
those were
look
the
bad.
golden eggs in these hands. You know what I mean? But
Oh, I took that to mean balls.
some people call balls eggs. Did you know that?
What?
Yeah.
Is this
I
is
don't
this
love
new
it.
is this new kid slang? Because I don't get it. I learned one the other day and I had to go directly to my children and be like, is this real? Because it doesn't sound real. Do you know what it means when somebody calls something Ohio?
Absolutely not.
It means it's bad.
What?
I don't know.
What does that mean to the good people in Ohio?
Nothing great. I'm sure they can't be happy about it. But
I mean,
apparently
what's
it
the
just means it's really bad.
because Ohio is apparently really bad?
I don't know what
That's
their issue is,
weird.
but I was driving home with my kids and I said to my 13-year-old, I was like, have you ever heard someone call something Ohio? And he just goes, oh, yeah. I'm like, so you
What?
have? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, is this what it means? And he's like, yeah. And I said, do you use it? And he's like, no. And I'm like, do other people use it? And he goes, no, but I've heard people on videos use it. He
Wow.
thinks it's lame.
I'll be honest. So do I.
Yeah. He thinks, so sorry. Let me back that up. He thinks it's Ohio. There we go. Used it correctly.
I also love that I'm getting so protective and defensive of the people of Ohio. I
Yeah. Oh,
have
I
never
feel
been.
like Ohio's never done anything wrong.
Yeah, I mean,
What's
I
wrong
don't,
with
yeah.
Ohio?
Yeah, let's get off Ohio's back, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it just feels like, why was that chosen? And why did we need another way of saying bad? Just go, oh, that sucks. What's wrong with sucks?
Sucks is a classic.
Or what's wrong with just straight up, oh, that's bad?
Yeah.
Understood. Every generation is going to know what you mean. Why
Yeah.
we don't need new words for good and bad.
Look, folks, as your podcast aunties, um, yeah, this is our call.
Yeah,
Let's just stop creating new vernacular, you know?
please.
I feel like if anything, for any other reason, it makes me feel really, really old and out of touch. And
Oh,
I know that
so
people have been
old.
through this for generations, and I
Yeah.
get that, but like, there's so many good ones. Like, haven't we topped out?
Oh,
Do we really need to
I
like
have to feel we have.
go back to the drawing board and create new terminology?
We don't. No, it's done. We're good. We have all the words we need. We got plenty.
Yeah.
We got more than we need. Let's
Yes.
leave it there. Leave it
I'm
there.
cool with it.
Yep. And that's the other. Then I'm like, okay, well, if that's what that means, well, what's the new way of saying something's good or something's cool? I assume you don't say that. But then I'm like, I can't think too much about like, am I saying something that's old fashioned? I don't care.
Yeah.
I know that I'm a lady of a certain age. I've accepted that. There's no hiding it. There's so much white in my hair. It just is what it is. I can't hide the age that I am, and I don't give a shit
Yep.
anymore about
Yep.
hiding that age. I learned that I am absolutely a lady of a certain age, um, because I saw clips from the Super Bowl halftime show, and the only thing I could think was those fucking jeans, man. I love them. When did that come back in style?
The Kendrick Lamar jeans.
Yes, and the internet. So many women are like those jeans, and I was like, thank you very much. And that's the moment I went, I'm a lady of a certain age, because so many women my age saw Kendrick, I'll say it, prowl across that stage, and looked at those jeans and went, I had a pair like that. They fit me like a fucking dream. I wish I knew where mine were right now. I know I'm not fitting in those. But just the idea that I'm gonna hold on to those, I'll probably ask to have them put in my coffin, if I'm being honest, because I loved those pants so much. Good luck getting this in a jean now.
Well,
I'm not gonna wear a jean now. No, thank you. They're lucky if I'm not wearing pajama bottoms when I go out. I did wear some the other day when I was so distraught over the Flyers trade that I was walking around like I'd been dumped. And I was just a hoodie and pajama pants going into 7-Eleven buying cookies. Who specifically goes to 7-Eleven to get cookies? The really sad dumped girl is what it turns out. But I've bounced back. I wear
yeah.
outdoor pants for the most part when I go out there. But jeans, no.
I think I remember the jeans you're talking about of
Yes,
yours.
they're the perfect shade.
Yep.
They're, comfortable at the waist, tight enough from the butt to the knee that it's like, that looks nice. And then flared out. Not so much that it's like too bell bottomy, but just enough that you're like, I'm gonna get these so wet at the back when I walk through a puddle. You know
Yep.
what I mean?
The slight flare is
Yeah.
flattering on everybody.
Yes.
The skinny jean is, and listen, I still wear skinny jeans. I don't care.
Sure.
Apparently they're out. We don't wear them anymore. I don't care. I'm like, especially in
Oh.
the wintertime, I want something that just slips into a boot. Like I'm not interested.
Oh, sure.
Wintertime in Canada, I should say. But the slight flare, not a
Yeah.
full bell bottom. You're right. But the one,
Just enough
yes.
of a flare. Yeah.
Ah, it is. It does. It looks good on every body type. It just
Yeah.
does.
I don't think he knew what he was doing. Like,
He
I
didn't.
think people thought they were going to like listen to his words and be more focused on that and all the different things he did with like Samuel L. Jackson and stuff. And uh, Serena, Serena
Yeah.
Williams, right?
Yep.
I thought he maybe thinks people would focus on that, but not us elder millennial gals. We were looking at the pants and
Yep.
going, does this mean it's safe for us? Again, if I
Yes.
find mine, they're not going to fit. They're not even going to come close to fitting and they will upset me greatly. But I feel like I have to look for them just to know I have them.
You
Because if
do.
I find out that I've gotten rid of them, I don't know what I'll do because
There
I'm
is
never going to find them again.
I also had one pair of my favorite jeans
Mm,
um from high school that I think I could fit back into now, and I have to also locate them.
yes.
My concern is how low rise they are. I don't remember,
Oh,
but the low rise, that's I'm like, can we just get a scotch higher? Like just give
yep.
me I'm not looking for a
Yep.
mom jean level. I'm just
No,
a little bit. Give me a chance
something
here.
something between Mom Jean and Christina Aguilera 2001.
Thank you.
Something in there.
I don't have to have the belly button fully covered, but I'd like it around the natch. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
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 Also, we have to go back for a second because I absolutely cannot make a comment about you saying he prowled across the stage. It's the perfect descriptor. I didn't
Yeah.
know it until you said it. It was a prowl.
The way his little shoulder hunch and the way he was like bat 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 or what fuck, I don't know that song. But the way he was doing it, his shoulders had a slight like he was like Bagheera from the Jungle Book. Like he was a jungle cat like prowling through Drake's nightmares. Take that, lady of a certain age. She knows up to date things.
Oh my
Yeah.
God. What a
What
gift
a
in my life.
Did I watch the Super Bowl? No.
No,
No.
I planned a band rehearsal. And then I got there and I said to everybody, I'm like, I'm so sorry. I planned this on Super Bowl Sunday. Like, is anybody upset? And literally, like, the two dudes that were there were like, is it Super Bowl? And I was like,
Amazing.
I'm with my people.
There it is. See,
There
Super
it is.
Bowl, not my style. I mean, I used to watch football relatively often, but I just kind of like got out of it. And now, I mean, as you know, hockey is my sport. And right now, I'm gonna say this. This is what is usually typically called the All-Star break.
Mm,
There's like a 2-week period where there's no games and for the regular teams, and then it's they like have the best of the best and they do games and competitions and all that kind of shit. This year, they decided to go with something they call the Four Nations Face Off. So
okay.
they made teams that are players. There's one for Canada, US, Finland, and Sweden. And they're all going to play a bunch of games. They picked random players from random things. Um, 3 of my boys were chosen immediately. One ended up getting hurt, but another one of my boys has since been added to make up for a different injury. And my head coach is an assistant coach. So we had like people all across, but I was like, Canada. I'm gonna really be behind Canada. 2 of my boys are playing for Canada, so I couldn't be
Of
happier.
course.
But I was like, Canada, for sure, for sure. And I'm gonna tell you something. Last night was the first game. It was Canada, Sweden. I couldn't have been more excited. It's for the first set of games are in Montreal, and then the rest of them will be in Boston. That's how they chose to split it up. That place was packed and loud. I mean, obviously, I wasn't there. I was watching it on TV, but I got so fucking emotional that multiple times before we've even dropped a puck, I said, I can't wait for the Olympics. I was like, this is what I want. And I was like, hearing that, like, the national anthem,
Oh,
I lost everybody in that fucking place was singing
of
like
course.
so loud. And I was like, this is what the country needs right now is this massive Canadian support. It was a beautiful, beautiful thing. And look, they have like each team obviously has a captain, and then they have, I don't know what they called them. I was too much in a tizzy to pay attention, but they also brought back like a fucking classic NHL player to be like a representative of each team. And the first one guy comes out for Finland, and it's fucking Teemu Selanne, who I was obsessed with, and I loved him so much. And so I screamed this like, oh my God, and I was like losing my mind. And I thought, this is the highlight of my life. There's never going to be anything better in this game. And then Canada's representative came out, and it was Mario fucking Lemieux, and I lost it. I had no idea that he was going to be there. I acted like I was in the room uh and at like some sort of like it was like a rock concert. It was like Bon Jovi had walked out or Lauren Ash, I guess. But I lost my fucking mind. I was screaming at a level of like I turned into my 10-year-old self seeing him like on the ice. I lost it. That whole place on their feet screaming. So we were all in like feeling it. It was a beautiful, beautiful thing. And look, guys came out for Sweden and US, and I was like, great. Uh, I was like, Mario Lemieux was it for me in the early 90s, and I lost it. And then I was like, we need the Olympics. We need the Winter Olympics, and we need them now.
Of course. I just wrote down Timu Salami.
Solani, but yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I know. I know. As it is, yeah. My husband was like, I don't know who that is, and I was like, oh, he spent a long time with Anaheim, and I think his career ended in Washington, if I'm not mistaken, but I could be. Um, and my husband was just like, Anaheim, like thinking as though the only people I loved were Philadelphia Flyers. And look, Philadelphia Flyers are the deepest love that I have for the sport, but there are very specific players sprinkled throughout the NHL that I've loved that never played for the Flyers, which is a damn shame.
Like Mr. Salami.
Yeah, yeah, he never.
I'll
Yeah. Well,
I'll
look, I
let it.
loved him. I was just very excited to see him, and I thought like I overreacted to him coming
Mm,
out, and I was like, that was a little embarrassing, but fine. But when Mario came out, I lost it. I
look.
I just full like the loudest screams in my home. It's because I wasn't prepared. I had no idea he was coming out. If I knew he was going to be there, I'd be like, "Where is he? Where is he?" And then it was just like I didn't even hear them say anything. He just walked down this carpet and I started screaming. Like before they've even put his little name on the screen, I'm screaming. And my husband is just like, "You're doing okay." I'm
I
like,
mean,
"Oh,
this
this
is like
is
when Mother Laurel and I went to see Robin Hood Prince of Thieves in the theater, and I will remind you, at the very end of the film, she screamed out, "It's Sean Connery, the son of a bitch!" So I think it's a
yep,
familial trait. Much like when we went to that 30 Seconds to Mars concert and we went to the signing after, and I was like, be cool, Christy. They're just people. And then I
yep,
looked at fucking Mr. Jordan Catalano himself and was
yep.
like,
Oh,
we all come about it honestly.
it's one of my favorite moments of yours ever.
Yeah.
It was the full body language and just how quick it turned. Just the like, Christy, they're just people. Relax, calm down. He's not like it was the arm pulls, it was
Yeah.
the body crumpling, it was the high pitched scream. But the joke is that switched my brain and made me go, oh, okay, now I have to be cool.
Yeah.
I was like,
Look,
I have to balance this out. He can't
we
have two
always do.
crazies in a row. So
We
yeah,
always do. It's what
yeah,
we do best.
it is.
Speaking of what we do best, what you drinking over there?
I have just the small, tiny endings of a Slurpee at this point.
Yeah, I'm on my second Diet Coke of the evening, and I couldn't
Oh,
be
I get
happier.
that.
I hadn't really been drinking leading up to the concert, and then after the show last
Oh,
night, I had a drink, and then I was like, I had like one and a half, and then I was like, I think I'm good. And then I also was like, I need to go to bed.
oh, sure, sure. Look,
But
at the
listen,
break, I may end up busting out a. I found something new, and
oh,
it's sitting in my fridge, and I know this isn't going to last me enough, so I might end up busting it out. It's like a Polar Ice cherry vodka cooler or something.
well, I've got a
I
little
don't know.
cooler in the fridge. Maybe we zip zap zop. You know what I mean? That's an improv game, by the way. I don't know why or where that came from.
Oh, Zip Zap Zop is in your soul.
Unfortunately, yes, it is.
I also, you'll maybe surprised, I would not suggest it as an album name.
It would
People
be a
might,
zip zap flop.
nothing you do would be a flop.
God bless.
I just feel you're gonna have a lot of people being like, I would love to hear an album about improv. And then it
Yeah,
would be like, not what we were going for.
no. And that's not something that I'm interested in. Love the art form, but you know, we don't need to
Of
sing
course.
songs about it. All right, let's get into the case. We're talking about Kenley Matheson this week. Obviously, this is well, not obviously. Spoiler alert, I don't know anything about this case. So I will get us all up to speed with this little synopsis right now. In September 1992, university freshman Kenley Matheson was last seen walking through a small town in Nova Scotia, Canada. Despite a few potential sightings, there has been no official sign of Kenley to this day. Police initially thought that Kenley had grown tired of his life and simply walked away. But now the police believe that Kenley was the victim of a potential serial killer. So, what happened to Kenley Matheson? Do his friends know more than they're saying? Did the police do everything they could to investigate this case? And did the supposed serial killer actually kill anyone? Christopher Christopher Oxborrow.
Wow.
So sorry. Christy
Nope.
Oxborrow investigates. No idea.
Yeah. You would
Wow.
also think that, like, oh, if she was a boy, would she have been Christopher? No. Christopher was not on the table, apparently.
Really?
Yeah. The name they wanted to go with, if I was a boy, Corey.
No.
I don't know.
Well, all right. It's their choice, I guess.
I mean, they had worse ideas for my siblings, so I guess it could have been so much worse. So I'm gonna give a disclaimer.
Alrighty.
This episode will contain mentions of suicide, rape, child sexual abuse, and violence against members of the LGBTQIA plus community. I wasn't sure if I should mention that, but I was like, just to be safe, I should give
Yeah.
everyone that warning. So trigger warning for those who need it. Alan Kenley Matheson, known as Kenley, was born May 8th, 1972 in Glendale, Nova Scotia, Canada. 2 years later, his parents, Alan and Sarah, had a daughter named Kayreen. When Kenley and Kayreen were 15 and 13, respectively, their parents got divorced, and Alan moved to Port Hawkesbury, which is about 29 kilometers or 18 miles from Glendale. Since both kids were attending high school there, they chose to live with their father. In June 1990, when he was 18, Kenley graduated from high school, bought a 6-year-old motorcycle, and drove approximately 5,000 kilometers or 3,000 miles to Banff, Alberta,
Whoa.
where he worked as a houseman at the Banff Springs Hotel from July to November. Kenley then returned to Nova Scotia, where he learned about a man named Paul Coleman. Paul, who was often referred to as Earthwalker, planned to walk from Kingston, Ontario, Canada, to Brazil.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which is 8,068 kilometers or 5,013 miles. If he was walking consistently for just the same pace for 24 hours a day, that would take him 75 days. Obviously, that wouldn't be sustainable. So Paul planned to go at like a slower pace. The goal was to reach Brazil by June 1992. So walking for 2 years. Wow.
Wow.
The whole point of the journey was to bring attention to the destruction of the rainforest and to
Mm.
encourage people to preserve their natural environment. Kenley was so inspired that he joined Paul on his journey, but the trip grew tiresome. They didn't have money, and they kind of had to find random places to sleep every night. And when they reached Louisiana, Kenley decided to return home. He grabbed his motorcycle and headed back to Banff. And for those who are curious, yes, Paul Earthwalker Coleman did manage to make it to Brazil. I don't know how long it officially took him, but when he got there, he just kind of kept going and eventually made it through 39 nations and walked a total of 47,500 kilometers.
Wow.
Paul currently lives in Chile, where he turned his home into an animal sanctuary.
Wow.
So, still doing beautiful things. In Banff, Kenley met a guy named Mike Wadhams, who suggested they head to Prince George, British Columbia, where they'd get work planting trees. When the season was over, Kenley returned to Nova Scotia, but then headed back to Prince George in early 1991 for the next tree planting season, which typically runs April to August. Afterwards, he spent some time in Vancouver with Mike before heading to Mexico in December. They spent 7 weeks traveling through Mexico, Guatemala, and Belize before Kenley flew back to Canada, specifically taking a flight from Cancun to Toronto on January 23rd, 1992. For reasons that were never explained publicly, Kenley booked that ticket under the name M. Carlson. I don't know why, and that will eat me alive for probably a long time, but no one ever came up with a reason.
Also crazy that that was a time where you could get away with,
You could do that.
yeah, like
Yeah,
it doesn't have to like identically match your passport
right?
or whatever.
And that's the thing. It's like, did you have to show any ID at that point? Probably not.
I guess not.
You had a ticket and that was good enough. Months later, Kenley returned to BC once again for tree planting season. When the season ended in August, Kenley went to Montreal, Quebec with Marie, a woman he became close friends with during tree planting. According to Marie, Kenley admitted he had feelings for her, but Marie said she was in love with somebody else. Marie described Hamish, who did tree planting with them. She said he was her soulmate.
Oh,
Sadly, Hamish died in a climbing accident 5 years later.
oh my God.
He was only 25. So Kenley hitchhiked from Montreal back home, which is like 1,300 kilometers or about like 800 or so miles. Weeks later, on September 5th, his father drove Kenley and his sister to Wolfville, where they were both going to be freshmen at Acadia University. Kenley planned on majoring in biology. According to his sister, Kenley seemed very apprehensive about going to school, which isn't that surprising when you consider the fact that in grade 12, it was said that Kenley was really looking forward to getting out of high school. And once he did, he then spent the next 2 years traveling around and doing whatever he wanted to do. University would be such a much more regimented lifestyle than what Kenley had been living. So, of course, he was going to be nervous. Heading off to university is a big change, regardless as to your lifestyle, but especially when you're used to just picking up and leaving whenever you want to. Kayreen said on the drive to Acadia, which is like 332 kilometers or 206 miles, Kenley suggested that their father just drop him off at the airport instead. So maybe it was a joke about his nerves, or maybe he was simply realizing he wasn't really interested in university. But once he got there, Kenley became quick friends with freshmen Kirsten Tomlinson and Tom Gordon. A week later, Kirsten took the boys to her father's cabin on Corcomb's Island, which is like 109 kilometers or 68 miles south of Wolfville. Since it was unseasonably warm, that they spent the weekend out on the water, swimming, jet skis, all the things. In the evening on Saturday, they had dinner with Dave and Janet, a middle-aged couple who were friends with Kirsten's father. The friends spent most of Sunday back out on the water and then headed back to university later that day. The next few days went by without incident. Kenley attended classes, but it seems he spent most of his evenings in his room alone. On Thursday, September 17th, Chris Hartery, who knew Kenley from high school, saw Kenley on Main Street in Wolfville. Chris said that Kenley was overly quiet and didn't really seem like himself. Kenley said that he was doing laundry, but Chris said that Kenley was empty-handed. And also there were laundry services at the school. So why would he come to the laundromat in town? But he also didn't have clothes or any sort of bag, so it didn't make sense. Chris then offered Kenley a ride back to the dorm, which Kenley took. The following day, there was a party at the student residence. Multiple people saw Kenley, and each of them claimed he was quite drunk. But since we're talking about a freshman at a uni party, I don't think that's a big surprise. It's
No.
probably more of a surprise that I just tried to get away with calling it uni. But
I was gonna let it go, but you said
Prowl,
what I was
Prowl,
thinking.
you're holding on to, but Prowl will walk back to. Uni,
Oh,
I'll
no,
let go.
we'll prowl back to prowl, okay?
Thank you very much. Ah, so a few people claimed that Kenley was hitting on several women, including Cindy McNeil. Cindy was dating a guy named Mike Hussey at the time, so Mike kind of gently told Kenley to back off. There was no sign of Kenley the following day. On Sunday around 1:15 p.m., Kenley withdrew $20 from the bank machine on Main Street. Around 4 p.m., Kayreen went to Kenley's room. She had been in Halifax for the weekend, so she missed the party on Friday. But since Mike Hussey was friends with Kayreen, she heard all about Kenley hitting on Mike's girlfriend. They spoke about it briefly, then made plans to meet up the following night for a study sort of session because they were both in the same calculus class and they had a test coming up. The next day, which was Monday, September 21st, Kenley was seen by his friend Tom Gordon around 2:40 p.m. Tom said he'd gotten money out of a bank machine and turned to head back towards the school when he saw Kenley across the street walking in the opposite direction. Tom said they waved at each other and kept walking. He said Kenley didn't appear to be in any sort of hurry. Tom said Kenley was wearing blue jeans, a purple t-shirt, a ball cap, and he was carrying a red and black backpack. At some point that afternoon, Kenley allegedly deposited $20 into his bank account. No specific time was ever given for that. But around 5 p.m., Kenley's mother, Sarah, called the communal phone at the residence, but someone said Kenley had gone down for supper. Later that night, Kenley didn't show up to the study session with his sister. Around 9 p.m., Kenley's resident advisor, Todd Barker, knocked on Kenley's door and asked him to sign a room agreement. Todd said when he knocked, Kenley opened the door, but like only a crack. But he said that wasn't unusual. Todd said he believed Kenley was ironing. He didn't suggest why he thought that, especially given that Kenley didn't have an iron in his room. So I don't know, like, did he see smoke or steam? Did he have a certain scent? I don't know why he specifically said he was ironing when we don't know that he could have.
Huh.
On Tuesday, Kenley did not show up to any of his classes. On Wednesday, September 23rd, Kayreen went to Kenley's room, but there was no answer. She asked Todd Barker to let her into the room. Everything appeared to be untouched. There were clothes in the closet, toiletries on the dresser. His passport was still there. It was later determined that Kenley's shaving kit and a few towels were missing. Otherwise, it looked like he just left the room to go to class. Kayreen called her father, who reported Kenley missing the following day. As of the release date of this episode, it has been 32 years, 4 months, and 28 days since Kenley Matheson was last seen. Since then, he has not contacted any friends or family members, and there has been no activity on his bank account, which had over just $4,000 in it at the time of his disappearance. So, very quickly, for the sake of clarity, because I know that was a lot, I'm going to go over the timeline as briefly as possible. So, Friday night, Kenley is seen intoxicated at a party.
Right.
Saturday, nobody sees him at all. Sunday afternoon, Kenley visits a bank machine in town, makes plans with his sister for the following day. Monday, Tom Gordon sees Kenley downtown around 2:40 p.m. And then around 9 p.m., his RA spoke with him at his room. And then that's the last time Kenley was known to be seen. So, of course, we're asking what happened to Kenley Matheson. Well, in a case where someone vanishes, there's only two options. Either that person left voluntarily for whatever reason, or someone made them leave. So we're going to look at both theories. Did Kenley disappear voluntarily? Well, that means one of two things. First, he disappeared possibly to just start a new life somewhere else. Kenley's passport was left behind, so that could mean he didn't leave voluntarily. However, it could also mean he planned to start over completely using a different name, so the original passport would then just be useless. Police found no signs of Kenley on any nearby bus routes or at any airports. However, maybe they were looking for passengers with the name Kenley Matheson. Maybe he was traveling under a different name, like how he used the name Carlson on that flight home from Mexico 9 months earlier. And when police weren't able to find any sign that Kenley had traveled from the area, there have been 4 potential sightings since. The day after Kenley went missing, one of his uncles saw a man sitting at the bar in a Halifax airport. The uncle said he did a double take because he thought the man might have been Kenley. The uncle doubled back to the bar, but the man was gone. The uncle like checked the bathroom and the rest of the terminal. There was no sign of this man anywhere. Uh, the man had left behind a full glass of beer at the bar. So it almost feels like as soon as they made eye contact, that guy was like, I need to leave. Whether
Hmm.
that was Kenley or not, of course, we don't know. And I'll say, I am curious if this was mentioned to police, and if so, how soon into the investigation. Because I know that I'm not a professional, but I would want to see every passenger manifest for every flight that was scheduled to leave that terminal within a few hours of that uncle's sighting.
Yeah.
And I know that would be it would take a very long time to verify each passenger's name, but if he did run, at least you'd have a possible name and a location to go off of. It would at
Yeah.
least be a start. Then in the spring of 1993, about 8 months after Kenley's disappearance, a man named Ian Stillwell claims to have seen Kenley in Halifax. Ian says he originally met Kenley when they were camping with their families when they were children. He specifically mentioned a memory of riding dirt bikes with Kenley at Annapolis Valley. Kenley's family confirmed they did camp at Annapolis, but it would have been in like 1981 when Kenley was like 9. Ian said they spoke briefly and Kenley didn't seem unusual. At the time, Ian had no idea Kenley was missing. But when Ian spotted a missing poster 3 months later, he contacted police. Is it possible for Ian to recognize Kenley so many years later? Sure. Maybe unlikely. But what reason would Ian have for making it up? At the time of his claim, there was no reward. In Kenley's case, my big question would be if Ian did see Kenley, why was he still in Halifax when the uncle thought he saw him at the Halifax airport months earlier?
Yeah.
So it seems unlikely that both men legitimately saw Kenley, but who knows? Maybe one of them did. For the sake of it, who knows? Maybe both did. In the fall of 1993, about a year after Kenley's disappearance, a man named James Pinot says he was standing in line at Palace nightclub in Halifax when he struck up a conversation with another young man in line. The man never gave his name, but he told James he was a student at Acadia University and he was in town for the weekend to do some club hopping. James mentioned he was attending King's Tech, a community college in Kentville, which is about 13 kilometers or 8 miles from Wolfville. The man said, "Oh, you must know my cousin, Wendell McKinnon." It turns out James did know Wendell, but when James turned to ask the man his name, the man had disappeared. When James returned to school days later, he ran into Wendell and told him the story. Wendell showed James a picture of Kenley, and James identified him as the man he had spoken to. James had no idea Kenley was considered missing when they spoke.
Hmm.
So that's 3 potential sightings within the first year, but all in Halifax. And it just seems hard to believe that a person who would want a completely new life to the point of cutting ties with their friends and family would only move like an hour away. It's also possible that the person they saw was not Kenley. Maybe it was someone pretending to be him. Why would someone pretend? Maybe I'm only speculating. Maybe someone wanted to keep up the ruse that Kenley was still alive.
Sure.
It's possible. There was a fourth possible sighting of Kenley, this time February 1997. A woman named Cynthia McKinnon said a young man came to her house in London, Ontario, canvassing for Greenpeace. Since it was cold outside, Cynthia invited the man in. The man ended up spending half an hour telling her about the organization and all the work that they do. She said he was really passionate about it, and she just wouldn't stop saying how attractive he was, which I deeply respect because if you ask Blanche about anything, she's probably gonna tell you if the person was attractive. It's just how it works.
Mhm.
16 months later, Cynthia was visiting some family in Cape Breton when she noticed a picture on her aunt's wall of a young man who looked exactly like the one canvassing at her door. The aunt said his name was Kenley and he had gone missing. It turns out Cynthia and Kenley are distantly related.
Huh.
Yeah. So Cynthia gets a copy of Kenley's photo from the aunt. She takes it back home with her. She goes to the Greenpeace office and shows it to a secretary and asks, "Do you recognize him?" The secretary said Kenley did look like someone who had canvassed for them in the past. Police then spoke with the secretary. She said, yes, Kenley did work for them at some point, but he no longer did. But she never said when he worked there. And I just think, like, there's no record of, like, dates because that even years would be helpful. The police report mentions checking with the Toronto Greenpeace office to see if Kenley ever worked there, but they did not seem to follow up on that. I don't know whether it was the police didn't follow up or Greenpeace, one of the two. The big question here is if Kenley did leave his life intentionally, why? Like, that's such a it's a big move to make. The first police officer involved with the case wrote in his report he believed that Kenley, quote, realized very early that it was not the place for him and decided to leave and not go home. Wild assumption, since he left all his possessions behind, but that's an interesting take in a police report.
Yeah.
But maybe there's something to the idea that he wasn't happy at school. It was suggested that Kenley was pressured by his parents to attend university in the first place. He didn't seem to have a real interest in being there. According to the police report, Kenley had taken a threshold test in math, which is kind of like an aptitude test. The police report said he failed miserably. We also have to remember this is a 20-year-old kid who just spent the majority of the past 2 years of his life traveling and living on his own. Maybe he found university too constricting. So I could see why he might want to leave. I just don't know why he wouldn't tell his family about it or why he wouldn't take any clothes or personal items with him. It was also said Kenley's bank account hadn't been touched since the day of his disappearance. Well, he'd need money for food or to travel somewhere else. And keep in mind, when Kenley joined Paul Coleman on that walk to South America in 1990, Kenley grew tired of backpacking because they often slept outside or slept on the floors of church basements. So if Kenley wanted to leave university behind, why wouldn't he have some sort of plan? And it would need some sort of money so he'd have some place to stay. Because otherwise, he's right back to that lifestyle he did not like, trying to figure out where are you going to sleep tonight. There was nearly $4,200 in Kenley's account. According to a Twitter post by the group Missing Kenley, the police contacted the tree planting company where Kenley worked in August 1992. His gross pay was just over $8,000. Is it possible that at some point Kenley had taken out a few $1,000s and maybe carried the cash on him so he would be able to leave at any moment? People say he carried his red and black backpack with him everywhere he went. In fact, he was last seen carrying that very backpack. Is it possible he planned to run and he got the cash out in advance? Maybe. But then why did he take $20 out of the bank machine the day before his disappearance? A documentary that I watched also claimed that Kenley may have put that 20 back into his account the day he went missing, but I haven't seen any other report mention that second bank trip, so I'm not sure. But if we're gonna look at the theory that Kenley voluntarily disappeared, we have to look at the other reason why he might do that, and sadly, that is if he was planning on taking his own life. Going to university for the first time is a huge transition for people. Granted, Kenley had spent the past 2 years traveling and living away from home, but going to the structured lifestyle of university isn't easy, especially for someone who's used to spending so much time outdoors and not most of his time trapped in a classroom. Not to mention, the work would have been more difficult than it was in high school. Maybe taking 2 years off made that work seem even more difficult. Maybe it was just incredibly stressful. Again, when his father was driving him to university in the first place, Kenley made a joke of like, maybe just drop me off at the airport. Like he said he's not looking forward to it. He was really nervous about it. Maybe at the time he went missing, he had not fully warmed up to it yet. According to the RA at school, Kenley supposedly spent most of his time in his room drinking. It's also possible that Kenley suffered from depression. In May 1990, Kenley went to the doctor complaining of being fatigued for about a year. At the time, Kenley was 18 and about to graduate from high school. Kenley's mother said that Kenley had experienced similar feelings in grade 6 and grade 9, as though it was some sort of like 3-year cycle. She questioned if he might be bipolar because she was bipolar. The doctor tested Kenley for mono, but it was negative. Kenley said that 2 months before that appointment, he developed abdominal pain to the point where he suffered severe nausea and vomiting, to the point he lost 15 pounds in 6 days, which feels insane.
Yeah.
Um, it just seemed, it seems though that he got better in the weeks leading up to this specific appointment. The doctor at the time suggested Kenley might have been suffering from chronic fatigue syndrome or possibly depression. Then in August 1992, just 19 days before leaving for university, Kenley was back in the emergency room with headaches, a sore neck, a fever, and a lack of energy. He said he'd been sleeping a lot more than usual. Now, I'm not a medical professional, so I'm not even going to come close to trying to suggest and diagnose what it could have been, because it could have been something physical, but it also could have been something mental. Shortly before this hospital visit, Kenley had traveled from British Columbia to Montreal with Marie, the woman he told that he had feelings for, and she turned him down. So maybe he was just taking the rejection badly, because rejection at any age stings, but especially when you're young and you don't have any experience with it. So in that moment, it feels like you're going to feel like that forever. It can be incredibly overwhelming for someone that's young and has no experience with it. There is also the possibility that someone else is responsible for Kenley's disappearance. Unfortunately, since nothing seemed out of the ordinary in Kenley's room and there didn't seem to be any sign of a struggle, the room was not considered a crime scene. That means the area was not secured, no
Mm.
photos were taken,
Great.
no itemized list of room contents was made, nothing was seized. So we don't have any evidence to go off. Not to mention, the police were pretty adamant that he'd left on his own. Again, that police report decided he realized the place wasn't for him and went home, or left but didn't go home, which is wild for the police to make such an assumption. So if Kenley was harmed by someone who were potential suspects, well, Kenley's mother, Sarah, said that in 1998, an RCMP officer told her he believed a suspected serial killer was involved. For whatever reason, this RCMP officer believes that a man named Andrew Paul Johnson was at Corcomb's Island the same weekend that Kenley visited with his university friends, Kirsten Tomlinson and Tom Gordon. And this officer also believes that Johnson had dinner at the Tomlinson house on the Saturday night. Johnson admits he was in the area at the time, but said he'd never met Kenley. He had no idea about anybody with the last name Tomlinson. And when Johnson said he was in the area, he outright said he'd never been to Corcomb's Island before. He was living in Bridgewater, working as a chef at a hotel. It was about 20 kilometers or 12 miles from Corcomb's Island. Kenley's friend Tom Gordon kept a diary during that time, and in it, he wrote that they had dinner with a couple, Dave and Janet, who just got back from Morocco. And after dinner, they spent the night looking at travel photos. So to me, an absolutely untrained, non-professional, That doesn't sound like Johnson at all. I
Right.
don't, I'm sure they could look up if he's ever been to Morocco, but I just don't see it. But also, based on the crimes that Johnson was convicted of, I just don't believe Johnson had anything to do with Kenley's disappearance. In September 1996, Johnson was caught masturbating in a public area near some young children,
Ugh.
specifically some young girls. He was forced to participate in sex offender treatment. During his treatment, Johnson made 5 phone calls to females asking them if they were wearing lingerie.
Oh.
4 of those females were adults. The 5th one was 11 years old.
Oh God.
He was also accused of trying to lure 3 12-year-old girls into his car while posing as a police officer. Police found KY jelly, packing tape, a mask, toy handcuffs, a fake police badge, and a meat cleaver in his car.
Jesus.
While living in British Columbia in 1997, Johnson abducted a 20-year-old mentally disabled woman and
No.
locked her in the trunk of his car.
No.
Johnson was convicted of kidnapping and unlawful confinement and sentenced to 8 years. At the time of his sentencing, a psychiatric report said that Johnson had psychopathic tendencies, and Johnson himself later stated, quote, "It could have gone much worse if I hadn't been arrested at that time."
Good God.
Prior to all this, Johnson had stalked a former fiance, physically and sexually assaulted several intimate partners, and committed more than 50 break and enters. None of that he was ever charged or convicted of.
Wonderful.
In 1999, Johnson was designated a dangerous offender, which in Canada means an automatic indefinite prison sentence with no chance of parole for at least 7 years. Police claim Johnson is the primary suspect in 6 unsolved homicides in the Halifax, Nova Scotia area, including Kimberly McAndrew, Andrea King, Shelley Connors, and Stephen Hall. Kimberly Ann McAndrew was last seen leaving Canadian Tire, where she worked as a cashier, on August 12, 1989. She has not been seen or heard from since. She was 19 at the time. Andrea Lynn King flew from her home in British Columbia to Halifax on January 1st, 1992. She called her family to let them know she arrived at the airport, but was never heard from again. Andrea's remains were discovered in a wooded area about 200 feet from a dead-end road, about 21 kilometers or 13 miles from the airport. Andrea was 19 at the time of her death. Shelley Denise Connors went missing from her home in Halifax on May 29, 1993. 2 days later, her body was found in a wooded area 200 yards behind a rink located on the same street as her house. She was 17. Stephen Michael Hall was last seen hitchhiking near Chester, Nova Scotia on April 27, 1996. Chester is about 66 kilometers or 41 miles west of Halifax. 7 months later, Stephen's body was found in a wooded area about 13 kilometers or 8 miles from where he was last seen. Stephen was just 21. As of this record, all 4 of those cases remain unsolved. Johnson denies being involved in any murder, and he says the police are using the unsolved crimes simply to extend his sentence. Johnson said, quote, "It's a ploy police use to keep people like me in prison. And I'm not saying I don't deserve a prison term because I do." Yeah.
Well,
Yep. Uh, do I believe that Johnson was capable of these murders? I mean, yeah, I think he's capable of murder. Murder was not like his MO, but he was known to get sexually violent towards women, so I wouldn't be surprised if he was at least responsible for what happened to the girls.
mm,
I don't, however, believe he had anything to do with Stephen's death or Kenley's disappearance. I mean, again, that's just my personal, non professional opinion. At one point, police searched Johnson's brother's house for human remains. They found a man's sneaker at the house, so they compared it to Kenley's DNA. It was not a match. Johnson has been denied parole 10 times Most recently in June 2021, the parole board have stated they believe that Johnson is a high risk to sexually reoffend,
Yeah.
mainly because he has openly reported a sexual attraction to girls between the ages of 12 and 16 and has said that attraction has only increased.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
I mean, the fact that he's being open about it is almost more chilling to me.
he's very self aware.
Good God.
It's the fact that they got him to start doing therapy, and he admitted that since doing therapy, the attraction has only grown.
That's weird.
Yeah. Oh,
It's sick and twisted and all of the above, but like
there's
it's
a
odd that
there's a reason that the police want to keep him in prison, and there's a reason that he's like, I get it, I should be here.
Jesus.
Yeah, it's intense. Um, so if Kenley was potentially murdered, and because I'm so confident that I just don't feel like Andrew Paul Johnson was involved, um, who are some other suspects? Well, it was suggested that Todd Barker, Kenley's resident advisor, or RA, at Acadia University, might be involved. What makes Todd a potential suspect? Well, to start with, Kenley's sister Kayreen felt Todd was acting strange throughout the initial disappearance. Kayreen said Todd often roughhoused with the students, and when she asked for him to let her into Kenley's room, he kept saying weird things like, be careful, you might not like what you find, and I don't know what we're gonna expect. And Kayreen kind of took this to suggest that Todd was preparing her in case Kenley had taken his own life. Like, that's kind of the vibe he was giving, was like, careful about what's behind this door. But the room was empty. So if Kayreen is correct, why would Todd jump to such a drastic conclusion? What did he see or know that he didn't tell police? Police indicated that Todd seemed nervous when they spoke with him. So was he nervous because he was hiding something? Was he nervous because a student went missing on his watch? Or was he simply nervous because some people find it nerve-wracking to speak with police? I mean, that could be it. Anxious people, for example. Um, but Todd isn't without suspicions. As you may recall, Todd originally told police he briefly spoke with Kenley on the night of Monday, September 21st. Todd had gone to Kenley's room to have him sign a room agreement. 2 years after Kenley disappeared, Todd was re interviewed. This time, he said, yeah, he went to Kenley's room to have him sign the room agreement on Sunday night. But you originally said Monday night. But then Todd said, well, he always had students sign room agreements on Sunday nights. So if he saw Kenley to have him sign it, it absolutely would have been Sunday night. So now, 2 years into the investigation, Todd changed the timeline. So
Oh
now
boy.
he's no longer the last person that saw Kenley. So now the last sighting we have is at 2:40 p.m. on Monday afternoon when Tom Gordon saw him walking in town. And I get getting the date wrong. I get it, but not immediately realizing your mistake and correcting yourself in the first 2 years feels suspicious. But what would Todd's motive be? Kayreen said Todd often roughhoused with some of the students. Maybe he tried to roughhouse with Kenley and Kenley didn't like it and threatened to tell the school about it. But even then, I just don't buy that would give Todd a reason to kill Kenley, and how he'd be able to like get him out of the room and do something to the body that we haven't found it in 30 some years. That also feels unlikely. Sticking with the school theme, as far as suspects go, it was also suggested that maybe Kenley's friends Kirsten Tomlinson and Tom Gordon know what happened to Kenley. All three were freshmen, met at the beginning of the year. Tom was a British exchange student who lived on the same floor as Kenley. Kirsten had taken the two boys to Corcomb's Island a week into school. Kirsten told police she was concerned she hadn't seen Kenley in a few days, So she asked Todd Barker to let her and Tom into Kenley's room. Kirsten said that Kenley wasn't there, but she noticed his red and black backpack sitting on the floor. She said it was surprising to see it because he took it with him wherever he went. Even though no photos were taken of the scene and no list of items were logged, Kenley's family have everything that came back from his dorm room, and there was no backpack in it.
Interesting.
Kayreen said when she first went to Kenley's room on Wednesday, there was no backpack. Kirsten said Tom was with her when they went into Kenley's room, but Tom denies that ever happened. Tom also denies, or Todd, rather, denies letting them into the room. He said he only let Kayreen because they were related. In Tom's diary on Wednesday, September 23rd, he wrote that Kirsten cleaned out her cluttered car. Um, and in a documentary I watched, they heavily implied that that meant essentially that they were clearing out the evidence from whatever they had done to Kenley, is kind of how it led. Um, but to me, if she's cleaning her car to hide evidence, why would he write that detail down? Why would
Yeah,
that
great
what would be
point.
the point in mentioning that? Um, a police officer wrote in his report that neither he nor his colleague were comfortable with the statement given by Tom Gordon. In June 2001, Tom contacted the police to ask if they found any proof that Kenley was dead. I
What?
it's an it's an interesting way of putting it. I would love to know the exact wording of his question. Like, did he simply say, like, is there anything? It's also interesting. It's just like randomly 9 years later, he contacted police and was like, so we got anything here?
That's weird.
Right? Well, and then in October 2002, he contacted police again to say he'd found photos from their trip to Corcomb's Island. And it's like, well, what good are those going to do? Okay. And I mean, if you're familiar enough with the true crime genre, you know it isn't unheard of for a killer to insert themselves into an investigation.
Of
Um,
course.
but again, what would Tom's motive be? It was suggested perhaps there was a love triangle and that both Kenley and Tom were interested in Kirsten. But would Tom really kill Kenley just to have a better shot at Kirsten? They'd all only known each other for like 2 weeks at this point. It just seems like a wild theory to me, especially when Kirsten said she wasn't interested in either of them. But outside of a love triangle, what would Tom's motive be? Because I'm struggling to find one. About 5 months after Kenley's disappearance, Kirsten went to the Wolfville police and told them she found Kenley's Lakers hat at her father's house on Corcomb's Island. When asked about this years later, Kirsten said she had no memory of finding it. The direct quote was, "That doesn't stand out to me at all." Even like decades later, finding the hat of someone who went missing months after they went missing wouldn't stand out. That's surprising to me.
Yeah.
Um, Tom described Kenley as last being seen wearing a hat, but Tom couldn't remember exactly what hat it was. Did anyone see Kenley wear that Lakers hat after that trip to Corcomb's Island? Because I mean, that would lead to a lot more questions. But his family said he was very known for wearing hats. He probably had a large collection he rotated through. Maybe he didn't notice that the Lakers hat was missing right away. For what it's worth, the RCMP administered polygraph tests to Kirsten, Tom, and Todd. They all passed. I'd like to see the questions that were asked
Mm-hmm.
specifically. Um, Now, there is one more suspect in Kenley's case. For clarification, the suspect now identifies as a woman, so I will be using her current name and she, her pronouns while referring to her life at the time of Kenley's disappearance. Also, this is going to get confusing because there's so many people involved. So I'm going to cut it down and refer to most of them by just their first names. because it's a lot of this person told this person who told this person, and it's
Right.
going to get nutty. So at some point, long after Kenley disappeared, his family hired a private investigator named Tom Martin to see if he could kind of pick up where the police left off. In June 2016, Martin was approached by two sisters named Selena and Sandra. And stay with me here, because this is where it gets confusing. Selena and Sandra claimed that their brother Randy told them that their other sister Suzanne believed her daughter Erin Smith murdered Kenley.
Okay. Wow, wow, wow.
Yeah. So to clarify, Selena, Sandra, Suzanne, and Randy, they're all siblings. For whatever reason, Suzanne thinks her daughter killed Kenley. So Suzanne tells Randy, but asks him to keep it a secret. And then one night, Randy has a little too much to drink, and he drunkenly confesses this secret to Sandra and Selena.
Got it.
So Randy also claims that Suzanne asked him to talk to Erin about it. And when Randy spoke to Erin, she allegedly said um, she and Kenley were interested in the same girl, and Erin simply took out her competition.
Okay.
According to them, Erin added, quote, "They will never find him." Randy claims this conversation happened in the fall of 1992, when Erin would have been about 20 years old. But Erin claims that conversation never happened. In fact, she says she had not spoken to her Uncle Randy since probably her early teen years. I also find the potential love triangle interesting as a motive because Erin was allegedly dating someone at the time. Are they suggesting that Kenley went after Erin's girlfriend? When did this supposedly happen? Kenley hit on some guy's girlfriend at a party days before he went missing, but that guy was Mike, a high school friend of Kenley's sister. But I'm just curious, was Erin worried about losing her then girlfriend to Kenley? Or did Erin like another girl? Because if neither of those things are true, then the love triangle motive goes out the window. And then what's Erin's motive now? When Erin was later interviewed about Kenley, she said she had absolutely no knowledge of who Kenley was and said she'd never even heard of the case, which is interesting because Erin was the same age as Kenley and also a freshman at Acadia University when Kenley disappeared. I'm not suggesting that Erin knew absolutely every single freshman at that university. There are thousands of students there. They're not all going to know each other. But when one of them goes missing, you can't tell me that campus wasn't all a buzz about it.
Yeah.
And then Erin's mother, Suzanne, said Kenley's disappearance was one of only 3 disappearances or murders in Wolfville in her lifetime. So every local was very familiar with all 3 cases. Basically, she's implying there's no way her daughter hadn't heard of Kenley Matheson. What were the other 2 cases that happened? Put a pin in that. We'll circle back. I just didn't want us to get too distracted from this specific moment.
Of course.
So Erin later said she had a falling out with her mother 2 to 3 weeks into school. So she ended up going to stay with her girlfriend. It's insanely interesting timing because that was around the exact time when Kenley went missing. But Erin's mother isn't the only person who claims they heard Erin confess. Erin's younger sibling, Toby May, told a documentary filmmaker she knows for sure that Erin saw a TV report about Kenley's disappearance. And when Erin saw it, she allegedly said something along the lines of, "That little asshole hit on the wrong guy's girlfriend, and he's buried on the back mountain of Melanson," which is a mountain range in that area. Toby May also claims that Erin used to bring friends home from school all the time, and she believes that Kenley was one of those friends. A question I have for investigators, did Kenley and Erin have any classes together? Did they have any mutual friends? I guess I'm just looking for any proof that they may have ever run into each other. Um, Aaron's family said they did. Aaron says they didn't. Could go either way. Um, but then there's a quote that Aaron allegedly told Toby May that I found particularly chilling. Um, but I can't read it exactly as it was said because then I'm going to be dead naming, and I refuse to do that. So instead of the name, I'm just going to say him
Okay.
so that we kind of have an idea. But allegedly, Aaron said something along the lines of, Aaron is a spirit that came down and liked his body so much that she killed him, she murdered him, referring that Aaron killed her old self.
Gotcha.
Selena and Sandra said they contacted Crime Stoppers with this information, but Crime Stoppers didn't feel the lead was legitimate, which is why the sisters then reached out to Tom Martin. Once Kenley's family had the information, they shared it with the RCMP, who did eventually search Aaron's family's property near Wolfville in December 2016, but they came up empty handed. I do want to point out the property covers 7 acres, and the police search was 70 minutes long. So I
Mm.
don't know how thorough it may have been. And who knows, maybe they focused on a very specific spot. Could go either way. A filmmaker who made a documentary about Kenley's disappearance received an anonymous email from a woman claiming to live in the same building as Aaron's mother, Suzanne. This anonymous emailer, who called herself Jane Doe, said that Suzanne told her that Aaron killed Kenley and that she buried him around the Bear Caves on Melanson Mountain, and, quote, no one will find him where we put him. Jane Doe says she contacted Crime Stoppers, but they didn't follow up with her. She also claims that Suzanne said the last person she told about Aaron went to the police and Suzanne was really upset about it. Typical me, I'm immediately suspicious. Because if someone went to the police and Suzanne was upset about it, why would Suzanne then go and tell somebody else? Are we supposed to
Yeah.
believe that this woman and Suzanne's sisters all went to Crime Stoppers and were ignored? Is Jane Doe one of Suzanne's sisters? I guess I'm just really skeptical of any email that is anonymous, I guess is my point.
Yeah.
Do I believe that Aaron may be involved in Kenley's disappearance? Maybe. I mean, Aaron claims her family is simply trying to collect the reward money that is currently in place regarding Kenley's case. But when Aaron's uncle Randy was interviewed, his story was inconsistent and it changed multiple times. So I don't know how reliable he is as a narrator. After refusing for years, Aaron finally agreed to take a polygraph in April 2019. However, only 3 questions were asked, and it was administered by an RCMP officer who also happens to be one of Aaron's uncles.
Oh.
Yeah. From the best I can tell, I guess she passed? I don't know. In May 2023, Kenley's family, along with a canine rescue team, 2 locals, and a Globe and Mail reporter, did a 2-day search of the Melanson Mountain, specifically the area known as the Bear Caves. According to the Missing Kenley Twitter account, a professionally trained cadaver dog named Rifle indicated human remains. In August 2023, the RCMP announced they searched that very area with another cadaver dog. The dog found nothing. In July 1993, 303 days after Kenley disappeared, his mother, Sarah, received a phone call at 3:45 a.m. The voice on the other end said, "You don't want to talk to me," and then hung up. Police put a trace on Sarah's phone the next day, but that person never called back. Was that Kenley that called? Was it possibly someone who may have harmed him and was just messing with the family? Could that voice have been Aaron? When Aaron looked at pictures of Kenley, she said she felt they looked a lot alike at that time. Is it possible the person claiming to be Kenley outside a nightclub in Halifax in 1993 was really Aaron? It's also possible the suspect is someone completely unknown to police. There was a rumor that during his time at Acadia University, Kenley visited a bar in Wolfville called the Anvil, and he had some sort of confrontation with someone. It's not a lot of detail to go off of, but if there was a confrontation, maybe Kenley happened to run into that same person on the last day he was seen. Wolfville, where the university is located, is a small town. In 1991, the population was just under 3,500. That, of course, doesn't account for the number of university students. I was trying to figure out like how many university students versus how many regular population there were. The best numbers I could find were from 2011. The population was 4,300, and the number of students at Acadia was about 3,500. So when you add in the students, it nearly doubles the town's population during the school year. And since the population is relatively small, there is not a lot of major crime happening. I did mention the 3 disappearances or murders that happened in Wolfville. Kenley's case was the first in 1992. There was the murder of Gregory Jodry in 1993 and the murder of Leslie Conrad in 2006. Leslie Ann Conrad was reported missing by her brother in October 2006. Her body was found 6 weeks later in a shallow grave 7 kilometers or 4 miles south of her home. Leslie was 45 at the time of her death. The property where her body was found was owned by her in-laws. So it shouldn't be a surprise that Leslie's husband, Kevin, was questioned on multiple occasions. However, he was never officially charged. In May 2023, Kevin was found dead on the same property. No cause of death has ever been reported, but foul play is not suspected. Kevin was 64 at the time of his death. So in August 1993, Gregory Gerald Jodry was visiting a tavern where he met Larry McLeod. The 2 men had some drinks and then left together. The next morning, Gregory was found beaten to death by the railroad tracks. Gregory was 35 at the time of his death. McLeod, who was 21 at the time, was arrested on charges of second-degree murder, but McLeod claimed that Gregory raped him, and McLeod was just defending himself. McLeod had 2 previous convictions for break-and-enters, but no history of violence. The judge decided that Gregory was aggressive. And so, yeah, McLeod did act in self-defense. Where was the evidence that Gregory was aggressive? Because it certainly wasn't mentioned anywhere that I could find. McLeod was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 4 years.
Oh my God.
Do I actually believe McLeod's version of events? No. No, I absolutely don't. Do I believe that McLeod got away with brutally killing Gregory simply because Gregory was gay? Absolutely, I do. McLeod was released from prison in 1997. He returned to his home province of Saskatchewan, Canada. While in Saskatoon, in the summer of 1999, McLeod raped and murdered a 92-year-old woman named Anna Hine. But Gregory was the violent one, huh? Doubtful. McLeod managed to leave town before getting caught and ended up in Prince Albert, Saskatchewan. In May 2006, McLeod was convicted of assaulting an 11-year-old girl.
Good God.
Yeah, again, I think Gregory was innocent and the judge was, probably homophobic. McLeod was given a 9-month conditional community sentence, aka house arrest. 9 months of house arrest.
For the 11-year-old child?
For the 11-year-old, yes.
What about the 92-year-old woman?
We're getting there. Because at this point, they don't know. No, you're asking the right questions.
God.
But him being charged in the case of the 11-year-old meant that McLeod's DNA got put into an offender database.
Got it.
That finally linked him to the 1999 murder of Anna Hine. McLeod was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life with no possibility of parole for 23 years. Great news! He's eligible for parole in 2031.
What do we have to do to keep these violent offenders in prison?
Can't we list him as dangerous? Like we did to Andrew Johnson? Couldn't we do that? Andrew Paul Johnson?
Spoiler alert, if he'd just stayed in jail longer than 4 years for his first murder, could have saved these other victims.
100%.
Disgusting.
100%. So, I mean, obviously the third case from Wolfville, we've been talking about it all day. Did Kenley Matheson leave on his own for some reason? I mean, it's possible he wanted a break, and maybe by the time he planned to reach out to his family, he felt it had been too long, and then he just didn't do it. It's also possible he left with the intention of coming back, but something happened to him while he was gone, and maybe either he was never found, or maybe he was found under another name and no investigator ever connected the dots. It's also possible that someone else was responsible for Kenley's disappearance, although no proper motive has ever really been brought forward. For me, the lingering questions are: why did Kenley use a fake name when traveling home from Mexico in January 1992? Did something bad happen on that trip and he was forced to hide his true identity to get home safely? His mother said when she asked him, he refused to talk about that trip. And if police truly believed that Kenley simply walked away from his life, why did they write in their report that Leo Caldy, the head of Atlantic Bloodhound Search and Rescue, brought in a tracking dog to search for Kenley in March 1993? Leo said he offered them his services, but they turned him down. So why'd they write in their report that that search happened and nothing came of it?
Interesting.
In 2017, the RCMP released an age progression sketch of what Kenley may look like now. There is currently a $150,000 reward for information that leads to an arrest or conviction regarding Kenley's disappearance. Kenley Matheson was just 20 at the time of his disappearance. He was described as an introvert with a zest for life, a witty sense of humor, and an adventurous spirit. As of this record, Kenley Matheson has never been found. Reporting for True Crime and Cocktails, I'm Christy Oxborrow.
I've got so much I want to talk about. Let's
Yeah.
take a quick break, hit the can, grab a drink, and we're going to be right back with more on the, I love that I'm like, don't mess up this name, Lauren, Kenley Matheson episode of True Crime and Cocktails.
Oh. There we go.
1, 2, 3. Welcome back to this episode of True Crime and Cocktails. We're, of course, discussing Kenley Matheson. And I got to say, this is confounding. This one feels so like nothing feels right. There doesn't feel like there's any clear, you know, explanation, motive. Like there's lots of things missing here. Even in the suicide theory, it's like, okay, there was some mental health going on. Maybe he was, depressed, etc. But there isn't like, I mean, that's also this person was a young person. Like that's
Yeah.
not atypical for a young person to potentially be going through stuff like that and feelings like that. So to me, it's like, it wasn't like there was like a mass amount of grief. Like, you know what I mean? Like now, again, I'm
Right.
not suggesting like people can present as being totally fine and of course be struggling internally and take their own lives. I'm not saying that that's not possible. It's just nothing feels like cut and dry, you know? Um, that being said, I'm going to go back to the beginning of my notes where the first one that I wrote down was what's a houseman?
I don't know. I say
I'll
it.
have to look
I
that
don't
up.
know.
Again, it feels like maybe a different term for like a butler. I don't know, like a junior butler. I don't know.
Ooh, maybe.
Weird. The Todd Barker stuff, weird to me. The fact that he was like, he opened the door a crack, but he was ironing. And it's like, what a weird specific. The fact that then
Right?
years later he changed the timeline, really odd. And it's interesting too, because when you said that Kirsten said that he let her in his room, I'm like, this is this is the beginning of the school year. I can buy that if it's the end of the year, he's seen, Kenley with Kirsten a million times, they're best friends or whatever. I could see at that point maybe, but
Sure.
it bumped me at first because I was like, why is he just letting a random friend go into this person's room like a
Mhm.
few weeks into the school year? And so it's interesting that then there was the discrepancy where Kirsten said the red and black backpack was there, and then everyone else
Right.
has said it wasn't.
Yeah.
And Todd also denies ever letting her in. Somebody's lying is the point, right?
Right?
somebody in the mix there is lying about something. And I think that's where you start, or where I start to like get so frustrated when we talk about these cases, because it's like that's to me like the closest thing you have to anything is
Sure.
the realization that it's like someone in this friend group is lying. Like, isn't that where you start as a detective? I don't know. I don't do it for a living.
Of
Don't begin to
course.
say I know, but that for me would be like something's up with this group of people because somebody's
It's
not telling the truth.
Yes, it's weird to be like, he let us in the room. I saw the backpack. And one guy is like, I did not let them in the room. And the other guy's like, I didn't go in the room.
Yeah, something's up. Somebody's lying,
So it's
right?
like, so did you not go in? But then it's like, why would you lie and say you did go in? Because
Did you go in and take the backpack?
then you're adding doubt about the backpack. And it's like, and we're
Right.
really just letting anybody into that room?
Well, that's a huge problem too.
I also
Now,
want you to know a hotel houseman
thank
is
you.
a hospitality worker who cleans and maintains a hotel's public areas and guest rooms.
So, like a cleaning person.
I assume.
We do. Oh, is this the term instead of quote maid,
Well, this
houseman?
we're also talking Banff Springs Hotel, so maybe that was just fancy made.
Okay, got it. But I
That
guess we don't call male maids maids. Is is
I
the
guess not. Is it
is
maid
the
and houseman?
it must be.
Oh, I love that that's what's happened here.
Doesn't
That
matter.
we're like this confounding case. Can't think about it.
Well,
But what
listen,
I don't understand is houseman. Because yeah, great call. I don't know.
listen,
I just
gendered.
assumed bellman or something.
Well, a bellman brings your bags up to your room, doesn't clean the room.
Yeah, good call.
Look, it's weird to have gendered terminology anyway. Like, why don't we just call
Yeah,
it a room, like a room cleaner or a cleaner? Like, why do we have to say maid? Maid is weird. Why do we need a male ter like, it's all weird anyway.
sure.
Um, all right, back to the more important things. But thank you for that because I was curious.
Of course.
So, the shaving kit and towels being the only things missing,
Yes.
to me, says one of a couple of things. One, I was like, is that a person that does have a plan to take their own life? I
Sure.
don't know what kind of razor is in the shaving kit, but that did pop out to me at first.
Sure.
It's not atypical for people to take their own lives in hotel rooms. It's quite common,
Oh,
actually,
sure.
statistically, that people who don't want their family or loved ones to find them, like physically, will do it in a hotel room.
Right. They also don't
So,
want to leave the family with the mess,
correct.
is what
So,
I've heard.
yes. So that did stand out to me. I was like, did he have a plan? And that's the reason why those are the only things he took. Now, conversely, is it possible that Kirsten went in there and took those things to make it look like he had a plan to go and kill himself? I don't know. Then I don't and I understand that she wouldn't then say like he must have killed himself. His razor is missing. Like perhaps she was trying to hide in plain sight. I don't know. Again, it's I'm throwing anything at the wall here because I feel like every lead is so minimal. So again, these are just the things that I came to my mind. Now, this sighting by his uncle at the Halifax airport. I have been to the Halifax airport. I'm sure a lot of
Oh,
our listeners have been to the Halifax airport.
sure.
There's nowhere to hide. Okay, it's very tiny. So
Got it.
this idea, I'm not saying that he was wrong, and it does feel very suspicious that this gentleman, possibly Kenley, left a full beer. But what I'm
Sure.
saying is odd is that it's like it feels like he would have had to physically leave the airport. Like there's only so many places you can go to hide. Was he
Sure.
hiding in the restroom? Like again, like if his uncle turned back and all, but then I'm also like, isn't it kind of weird that his uncle saw him, thought it was him, walked away, gave him enough time to get up and leave, and then went back? Like most people, your instinct would be, oh, I know that person. And you walk over to the person and say, hey, how are you? Right?
Sure.
Like, so there's something about that story that's odd to me that doesn't feel like it adds up. Why do I
Right.
think his uncle would lie? I'm not saying he is. I don't know that he would have any reason to. Do I think it's possible that there was someone that looked like him, perhaps? Yeah.
Sure.
I feel like there's no way we would ever know. Um, you said Ian Stillwell, and all I heard in my mind was Stillwell Angel, A League of Their Own. Um,
That that movie comes up a lot on this show.
I really love it. Anyway, um, okay. Ian Stillwell says they spoke briefly, contacted the police when he saw the missing poster months later in Halifax. To your point, if he wanted to disappear, why would he stay in the same area? Feels unlikely to me. My question there is, let's say for a second it wasn't Kenley, but this person
Sure.
mistook him as Kenley
Sure.
and said to him, hey, I know you, or whatever, right?
Sure.
Did the guy just go with it?
Maybe.
Which is weirder. So it's like if it wasn't Kenley and Ian is telling the truth that he was like, "Hey man, I know you from when we were kids," right? That was his
Sure.
story.
Yeah.
So this guy that wasn't Kenley was like, "Oh yeah," like was he literally going along with it, being like, "I have no idea who this guy is." Like that's
I
weird.
mean, that's possible, but what about did he actually outright say the name? Or
Great
was it
point.
like, hey, we totally camped together when we were kids? What if this was somebody else he had actually camped with and he was just confusing it
Great point.
with
Or
Kenley?
the other detail I find very fascinating about this is that Erin, of course, during this timeline would have been pre-transition. And Erin herself said at that time, Kenley and I looked a lot alike. That
Yeah.
is a bizarre piece of this where it's like, was it Erin in all of these scenarios? Like,
Possible.
even if Erin had nothing to do with the murder, again, we're dealing with areas that are not hugely densely populated. Like, is it possible that this is, I mean, it's just a bizarre additional detail. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, okay. James Pinot meets him in the line at the club. Man disappeared, confirmed with his friend with the photo that that was definitely him. Again, then my question is, how much did Kenley and Aaron look alike at the time? Were they doppelgangers? Like again, like is there so
Uh,
many men that look like Kenley? Like it's just odd to me that people kept identifying him with like photographic proof. It's like, so if he's
right?
not alive, if he's dead at this time, who is this man walking around? Because it feels like if it was just one story, then it's like, well, if it was just the uncle story, I'd go, that doesn't hold any water for me. But it's
Sure.
the fact that there's multiple people because then we get to Cynthia McKinnon, this canvasser for Greenpeace. Also, who invites a canvasser in your own home? Lady Jane, what is she
Oh,
thinking?
yeah, you
You
don't
couldn't
do
pay
that.
me to invite any canvasser into my home, let alone a man when I'm seemingly a woman home alone. I assume she's a woman home alone. My God. Um, the fact that then they ended up being distantly related? What is up?
It's weird.
It's weird. The fact that she then was like, she went to the Greenpeace office. They said, yes, he did work here, but not anymore. To your point, when?
Yeah.
Because my big question that started to come up was we know that this person did a lot of what I would describe as atypical travel. Okay. Going
Yes.
with a man you just met on a walking tour from Kingston, Ontario, Canada to Brazil. The fact that he made it as far as Louisiana, that's a chunk of time.
Yeah.
That's an atypical travel choice.
Yeah.
Um, Going with another guy that he just met to Mexico and South America, kind of out of nowhere, atypical travel choice. I'm not
Yeah.
judging it, by the way. I'm just saying I could see that someone who had made those choices, who has been in situations where he could survive on very little money, even if he didn't like it, I could buy that perhaps he decided to kind of run away from his own life. You could argue that some of that prior behavior was a form of that also. Yes, he
Sure.
always came home, but I buy that it's possible he could have ended up in another province. That's not out of the realm. And then the thing that kept coming to me was like, is it possible that he went to Toronto, was doing this completely other different job under his own name, under a different name, who knows? And to your point, something happened to him randomly and he's passed away somewhere else.
It's possible.
Were there any John Does at that time? Did he not have ID on him? Like
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, and I know that that would be very difficult to begin to try and unravel because it's like, well, he could have been anywhere. So if he was anywhere and the body showed up anywhere during whatever, a 15-year time period or more, I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know. It's a needle in a haystack, right? So it's not impossible, but at the same time, it's like there wouldn't be DNA kept from those bodies. We're talking about the 90s here, so
Right.
we would never know. So again, to me, if we're talking about like simple explanations, because simple explanations are often true, is it possible? Yes, he wanted to escape from his own life a little bit, went to another place, something unfortunate happened to him there, or he took his own life there. He had no identification. He was a John Doe, and we would never know. I think that that's a kind of simple explanation. That's very unfortunate,
Yeah.
but possible, right? But then I would say, what on earth does this other family have to gain about trying to suggest that their family member committed this murder? This is again odd. It's odd for someone's own family to be going so hard against them.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, is this transphobia? Is it because Aaron transitioned and the family doesn't support it and they're lashing out in this way? That's a terrible thing to even, imply. So I'm wildly speculating. I'm trying to find any source of meaning, motive in any of these
Of
actions
course.
throughout this. Um, but again, it has to be noted that it is atypical that a bulk of a family turn on one family member saying, yes, she killed this person. Yes, she's admitted it, and they're telling people, and like that's just again, every turn this case takes is so bizarre. Um, yes, and of course we have to go back to the people that last saw Kenley alive. Todd Barker, Tom Gordon. But what would these motives be? The only other thing I thought, because there was the implication that Todd would roughhouse with students. And
Sure.
then it's the only thing I thought, is it possible they were in a wrestling move and he tried to choke him out and accidentally killed him? Did he do something
Mhm.
too accidentally violent and a neck was snapped? Again, I'm just trying to throw anything at the wall here. But then it turns into, again, it's like then you're hiding a body that was never found. And then where? I don't know. And then again, like how do we bring Aaron into this scenario? Why, if it wasn't Aaron? Why has this family inserted themselves and Aaron into this unsolved crime?
Yeah.
It's so odd to me. Um, I mean, the fact that Tom Gordon was calling the police years later asking for evidence that was there any evidence Kenley was dead? Very suspicious. Calling again with old photos? Very suspicious. But then what is Tom's motive? To your point, they're a few weeks into the school year and they've got this like barely a love triangle with a woman who says she wasn't interested in either of them, unless she's lying. What are we doing?
Right. And Tom is also the last person we know of to see him.
Right. We're
So
also
it's
just believing him.
that's exactly it.
There's no proof that he saw him that day across the street. And by the way, if they
Right.
were close friends, they just waved at each other. They didn't stop and chat. That's weird. By the way, Tom or Kirsten is lying. We know that one of them is lying because she said, Tom and I went into that room. And Tom said, no, I didn't. So one of them is lying. How hard have they been investigated? Tom's the last person to see him alive, and
Yep.
he is there's a 50% chance he's not only lying about that, but he's lying about this other thing. Like that's a prime suspect to me because we know somebody in that group is lying, and why would they lie if they didn't have a reason to?
Oh yeah, something is off.
Right? Then why is she contacting the police? I found his hat at my dad's house. What does that matter? Like, how does that factor into this case?
I
It
don't know,
doesn't.
because it was even just like this was from when we went, you know, a week or so before his disappearance. And it's like, okay, cool. But that's not going to help like find him.
Well, and again, it feels like when we know that Tom or Kirsten is lying, that's a fact. I can say that as a fact. Their two
Sure.
stories don't match. So one of them is lying. Both of them went to the police with stuff that was seemingly not relevant. So what's up there? What's up with Tom's diary entry about like she was cleaning out her car? Is this a case of the two of them either murdering him together and this is like the trophy? Is him remembering when she disposed of evidence? Is it
Interesting.
that one of them did it? Is it that Tom did it and he wrote that in his diary to implicate Kirsten, to try and make himself look innocent? Did he actually go into that room with her? Is it the opposite? Did Kirsten commit this murder and then got into his room to hide some of the evidence? Like, again, these are those questions where you're like, how hard were they investigated? And why didn't it matter to police more that we know for a fact one of them was lying? Because, spoiler alert, people who have nothing to hide have no reason to lie to the police in a possible murder case.
Yeah. Oh, it seems like the police right away were like, he took off. He's doing a new life. And they were like, and that's it.
And we don't care that someone is blatantly lying. I mean, that's just, I mean, I hear you. It's just, it grinds my gears.
I get it.
It grinds my gears. Um, and then again, if it feels like signs are pointing towards Tom and Kirsten, then this other, it's like, then this other Aaron's family, which I will say because there's just too many names, Aaron's
Yes.
family doing this whole dog and pony show. It's like, well, if she didn't do this and you're doing this to somehow get back at her for some reason, or you're not 100% sure, you've just taken the heat off of people who may have actually murdered this person.
Yeah.
So get out. If you're not intensely 100% sure, what are you doing?
Oh,
And why are you
it's,
telling people this?
yeah. I also, and I know we'll never know, I desperately want to know who the anonymous email was from.
It's got to be one of them.
Because
It's got to be.
it just feels wild to be like, she told somebody and they went and told the police and she really got upset. So then she told me. And it's like, well, why does she trust you more than she trusted the person that she already told? That doesn't make any sense. And for them to have almost the exact same story, it's like, well, now you
Yeah.
sound like one of them trying to give more credit to their story
And
without
then,
acting like they're related.
well, but also then, Erin took a polygraph and passed that was conducted by her own uncle. So now that's
Yeah.
not like there's nothing exonerating her either.
Yeah.
So it's like there's no proof that she did it, but there's also no proof that she didn't. I mean, absolutely wild. Um, the one other thing to me that really stood out that I think is weird that the police didn't look into harder, but it feels like how much were they even looking into at all? Let's say for a second, Kenley tried to escape his life to whatever extent, goes to Toronto, which is where that woman had seen him canvassing for Greenpeace, right?
She saw him in, I want to say London.
Okay, but
I thought, or
Ontario.
Kings. Yes, she saw him in Ontario. I think it was London. And then they wrote in their notes that they were going to search, they were going to contact the Toronto
Right.
Greenpeace office to see if he was also there.
So the Greenpeace office also did confirm that he did work for them for some amount of time. Here
Yeah.
is my question.
Yeah.
Was there a secret bank account? Because we know he didn't
Mm,
touch any money in his own account. But if
right.
we also know that he allegedly had a job after he went missing, right?
Right.
Then either he had a secret bank account where those checks were being direct deposited, if they did
Right.
that at that point in the 90s, which I think they did. That technology existed at that point, I think. Or he would have had to have gotten the check in person and then gone and cashed it and taken the cash, right?
Right.
But again, why, if they're going to the Greenpeace office to investigate, there has to, and someone had already said, yes, he worked for us. Then aren't these questions that could lead to more context? Like what I just said? Well, then how was the person getting their check? Because if it was direct deposit, we need to look into that bank account. If it wasn't, then it does start to run dry, right? Because
Sure.
I guess he could have taken it to a check cashing place or to a bank and been able to cash it in person. But again, these are the questions that you ask. And I understand that the police don't have to give every detail of all of how they do investigations and what they did or didn't find to the public. I get that. I get that. But again, it's what we always say on this show, which is like, I just love to know. I'd love to know how hard you looked into Tom and Kirsten. I'd love to know how hard you looked into Greenpeace. I'd love to know how hard you looked into bodies of John Does found in the area in Ontario around that time.
Yes. Oh,
Those to me are the three big things. And then the Aaron of
yes.
it all, it's either, yes, this person is responsible for a murder, or it's a complete red herring that like again to me is was one of the most confounding details of the whole thing. Because if she didn't do it, it
Yeah.
is absolute madness to me that she's even in the conversation.
Oh, 100%. I mean, there's just none of it makes sense. The only thing I would say that makes sense, I don't think the potential serial killer had anything to do with it.
I agree.
I just don't
I
think
agree.
he's any part of it. Um, but yeah, it's tough because yeah, unless Aaron did it, then there's no reason to be there because all of Aaron's family is saying one thing, Aaron's saying another. Is that because Aaron's trying to cover for herself, or is it because the family is, for whatever reason, going against Aaron? I mean, of course, we're not going to know. And just so many people feel suspicious.
But if Aaron did it, what motive does Tom and Kirsten have to lie?
Great call.
That's what it keeps coming back to for me is that it's like, but we know one of them is lying. There's no reason to lie to the police unless you're struggling with a mental illness, I guess,
Sure.
that you're just deciding to lie. But I'm giving a real wide berth with that one because it's like typically if this is a person that you had any level of friendship with and they have died, what do you have if you absolutely didn't do it? What motive
Sure.
do you have to lie to the police? There's something to me like that's where there's smoke, there's fire.
Sure.
And again, if Aaron did it, why would they be lying?
Great call.
Christy Oxborrow, what a fantastic choice of a case. This one unraveled me, confounded me, and as always, you presented it succinctly,
Oh,
respectfully. 12 out of 10. Fantastic work as always.
it's an honor, and it was exciting to be back in Canada.
I love that. I love that for all of us. And we
Yeah.
thank you, dear listeners, for joining us on this case. If you haven't already, give us a follow on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at True Crime and Cocktails, on X at Not Detectives. If you'd like some bonus content, go over to patreon.com/slash True Crime and Cocktails to learn more about our subscription-based service over there. And the only place for official True Crime and Cocktails merch is, of course, truecrewmerch.com. So check that out as well if you're interested. Christy, do you want to tell the people about next week's episode?
On the next True Crime and Cocktails, Luna Park Fire.
Ooh, fantastic. This is a patron's poll pick. The people voted for a case from Australia, and this is the choice. Can't wait to learn more about it. Christy, do you want to say goodnight to the people?
Good night, TV lady.
Good night, Mario Lemieux.
Oh.